typically we aim for about a minimum of $500 cash flow per month with
Okay.
our properties. I think you have to.
I think that would definitely be number one advice. The biggest determining factor in my mind is, and people don't really realize that, but it's like that right there piques our interest. And I think that is the biggest pivoting point when we're deciding whether or not to move forward. So it's interesting. It actually starts well before walking into the property. It starts with the initial looking at a listing. It is very expensive to. So if one already has that, you're already saving right away.
Welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Show. Today we're joined by Patrick and Alisha, who have been investing in real estate for the past 4 years. Focusing on the BRRRR strategy and secondary suites, they've been hands-on in transforming rundown properties into profitable investments. We'll dive into their journey, lessons learned, and how they're growing their portfolio. Patrick, Alisha, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, Al.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about how you guys initially got started and sort of your journey to this point?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of how we got started, it was kind of a really random day. We were at my parents' house and we were talking about some of their friends who were investing in real estate. And we weren't really sure what we wanted to do, both working jobs that we didn't like. Just thinking about some of the skills that we have, we were like, why couldn't we do something like that? So we were just driving home and thinking like, Patrick's really hands-on. I'm really good at the marketing side. That's what I've done my whole life. And we just thought that would be a really good skill set to utilize to start investing. So we decided to just jump in and start learning about it from there.
I love that. I love that. Always working with the skill set that you have just gives you an inherent competitive edge, you know? So I love that, working with the grain as opposed to against the grain. Now, you guys, you initially, let's say, heard about it and you thought about it and you're like, hey, this could work for us. What got you from just the idea of it to taking action with your first deal?
That's a very good question. And it goes back to, I think, how we got into it initially too, is it was almost desperation. We both knew that we wanted something better in life and that we weren't happy currently at our jobs and that there had to be more out there for us. And so it was almost in desperation and frustration at our jobs that
Yeah.
really motivated both of us, right? Like, I think prior to us meeting and prior to knowing Alisha, like there was other things like I just knew I wanted to try business wise and stuff. And then once we got together and looked at like the skill sets that we did have, it was just a very aggressive drive we had in the beginning, mostly out of desperation and frustration, I think.
I think it took us a while though to take action, to be completely honest. Like we
Yeah.
researched for like 6 months before we did anything. We were so scared. We were like, are we making the wrong move? This person does this person does that. Like what we realize now is there's so many different strategies that you can go, like different roads that you can go down. But we started second guessing what we were doing and it took us a while to pull the trigger on something.
I get that. And 6 months to one person may be like, wow, that is a long time. And to others, they may be like 2 years where they've been wanting to start investing and they just haven't pulled the trigger yet. So it is definitely relative. And I think 6 months is actually a good point where it's like you have enough time to learn enough, because you don't just want to jump into something without knowing enough about it, but you had enough time to learn enough and then decide what's the strategy, what's the plan of attack, and how we're going to proceed with this, so that you're making purposeful moves with it. Now, you spoke about the fact that there's so many different strategies. What drew you guys to this initial strategy?
Well, okay, so it's interesting you asked that because the 6 months led us, it wasn't like we purchased our first property at 6 months. That was when we first started making moves like with a realtor to go start even looking at properties, right?
Yeah.
And so that was very important because that got us out into the field and basically getting your hands dirty, right? And
Yeah.
it was very important because when we first started that journey, we first started with the realtor, we were going down the path of, hey, we think we're gonna flip houses, like we're gonna do the work and then just sell them right away, right? But then as we saw more and more, and as we started running numbers and then started really thinking about like, well, what is my skill set? Can I actually do high quality flip products, or am I do I have to like scale that down a little bit, something a little more simpler? So it was like the hands-on and getting out there. So at 6 months, yes, we started to go hands-on, but it took us it was probably 3 or 4 months after that before we actually ended up getting the first one. And from the moment when we first went out to when we got that first one, it had completely changed. And our thought process on it had completely changed.
I love the fact that you highlighted that because oftentimes we feel like we need to be able to see 10 steps ahead. And most of the time we don't have the luxury of being able to see that far ahead. So it's like, just what's that next step that I need to take? Okay, let's reach out to a realtor. Let's get the process going. And then you might need to pivot as you move along, and as you take the next step. You don't need to know all 10 steps ahead of you. So I think that's what trips people up from like getting started and actually making that progress. So I love the fact that you were self-aware enough to be like, okay, well, maybe this one isn't as good of a fit for me as potentially, pivoting to this strategy. That might be a little bit more aligned. So knowing yourself, knowing those skill sets, and then just having, I guess, either having the discomfort like you guys had to really push you to take that action, or, just having the courage to take the action if you're not in a place of like real discomfort. But having that why absolutely helps being that driving force between like, why should we do this when we can just Netflix and chill? Why reach out to an agent where we could just relax and enjoy our time off? We already don't like what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the point you brought up about like us being able to like kind of
Mhm.
analyze and then shift a little bit, because we've also found that our long-term goals, even since we bought that first one and started there, it's very important that we've been constantly analyzing every like couple of months and like, is
Yeah.
this still aligning with our goals? Are we still wanting to go down this path? And we found that even in, year to year, month to month, like that can change so fast and drastically, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's a very important point that you brought up, that like you need to be very self-aware, and you need to be able to self-analyze and know
Yeah.
maybe when you need to pivot.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Just constantly re-evaluating because it allows you to refine your process. It allows you to make adjustments to the direction that you're heading in, and just
Right.
keep your finger on the pulse of that as well. Now, I love how we broke down this initial start to it all. Now, I'd love to dive into you guys getting into your first property and how that sort of progressed over the time.
Do I start with that?
Yeah, so our first property was a semi-detached property. So one half with a basement suite. Um we decided to gut that entire property. It needed a lot of work. So we moved into the property. This is our first one we've ever bought personally or business-wise. So we tear up everything in there. We're living in it. We don't have a kitchen in either unit. We don't have a bathroom in either unit. Like, we have nothing functioning in there. It's just we're feeling way over our heads essentially. We're doing all of this while still working our full-time jobs. It just feels really overwhelming, but we really dove in and just, got our hands dirty as much as we could. Um, but I think it was one of the best experiences that we had because we learned so much during that property. Um, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we actually ended up buying the other half of that property about 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later. So now we own the whole fourplex, but originally it was just that half, and getting started there, it was, at that time, it seemed like such a big price point for us. It was, I think, $320,000 we bought it for. It seemed huge, but since then the prices have gone up like crazy. So now looking back, it just doesn't seem as overwhelming as it did at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just diving into it seemed like a very overwhelming project.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. Now, how's that for a first project, right? Like, who needs a lipstick renovation, right? When you could just do a whole gut job.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
Question for you guys. Did you guys sort of, leading up to this, did you guys just sort of have like savings aside and have capital aside where you could just jump in and pull the trigger, or was that an obstacle that you needed to overcome as well?
We did have savings, but it we leading up to it again, it was almost a full year between the hey, we want to get into this, and then finally buying that first one. We hunkered down big time throughout that. We went into full on scarcity mode, budgeting
Yeah.
mode, and we spent very little and we saved a lot. And although we did have a little bit saved, it was our habits in that year while we were researching, while we were trying to hone in on what we wanted to do, that
Mm,
really got us over the line and really got us to that first one. And so it's like that mindset, I think going into that mindset the year even prior to buying the first one really led us into a really good mindset when we were doing the renovation, when we were trying to budget for it and keep costs down and stuff. And so it was a good habit that we formed early on that like carried very well through.
yeah. Yeah, no, I fully agree. And from the sounds of it, you guys weren't scared to live in the outside of your comfort zone, in that very uncomfortable zone. I mean, if you don't have a kitchen and a bathroom, then hey, that says a lot already.
It was very motivating for me. It made me perform the work pretty,
Yeah,
I was on schedule for everything to try and get us the bathroom and kitchen back.
I can imagine. I absolutely can imagine. But honestly, that's the big key to growth is, I mean, you don't have to. I guess for people listening out there, you don't have to give up your bathroom and your kitchen, but you need to get outside of your comfort zone. You know what I mean? And that's where the
Exactly.
magic happens. So it
Yep.
seems like you guys, from the starting point, you were very methodical about it all, lining the pieces up. Now, if we were to go just to you guys doing walking through properties from when you got started to now when you walk a property, what's the first thing you check to see if a basement suite is even possible? What are some key things you guys are looking for?
So it's interesting. It actually starts well before walking into the property. It starts with the initial looking at a listing. I can almost
Hmm.
tell right away. There's certain ones that jump out right away, and there's certain things you just absolutely know what to look for,
Yeah.
specifically when it comes to legalizing a suite in Calgary, which is where we are, Calgary, Alberta. So like you had mentioned, the a separate entrance completely already being there because it is very expensive to cut in a second entrance if it's
Oh
not
yeah.
already there. So if one already has that, you're already saving right away. The general layout, like I'm very I have very good visual when I like can look at pictures, and so when I'm looking at the listing pictures, I can picture the entire house and I can picture where each room is, where the utility room is and stuff. So I'm right away analyzing what the layout of the house is. Is this going to be really good to add the suite in? Is it going to keep entrances separate? If I need to get washing machine and dryer upstairs for a separate laundry, am I going to be able to get the utilities there easily? So it's like I am analyzing even before we walk into the property. And normally by the time we're going to the property, it's more so to see how because, like, you can always make a property look really good online, but
Yeah.
being there in person will always tell a different story. So it's more so when we're actually going there, is it how much work is it actually gonna be, right? And
Yeah.
what are you gonna be doing? I almost have it decided beforehand if it's gonna be a good one or not.
Just to clarify, we
Yeah.
have never actually added in a suite from scratch. We always take illegal suites and we legalize them. Um, the reason being is because Calgary has a grandfathering program where you need to do way less work to legalize a suite versus adding one from scratch. So
Mm,
that's always been kind of our sweet spot is figuring out places that have a lot of value add in legalizing the suite, which is a lot less expensive than adding one from scratch. So that's been our specialty is finding
yes.
those illegal suites.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. Okay. Yeah. Though that makes a ton of sense. Again, I guess it does really vary based off of where you are and what that looks like. Because yes, sometimes like we here in Edmonton, sometimes, or I'm here in Edmonton, sometimes it can make sense to rather go with an unfinished basement versus something that's finished, and you kind of need to do a ton of demo work. But that being said, sometimes it helps having like an illegal suite where you don't need to do too much to legalize it, or a finished basement where maybe the layout kind of supports adding a suite without making too much changes. But I love the fact that you highlighted that. And the one thing that really stood out that you said there, Patrick, is the fact that you guys do a lot of the upfront work before even viewing the property. Because what this does for a lot of, especially I find newer investors that I work with, is they're very quick to go view properties, which is good. You need to get out there, you need to view properties, but it's easy to get that burnout and get that fatigue from just viewing a ton of properties and then doing your due
exactly. Yep.
diligence after the fact. If you can do the due diligence up front or as much of it as possible, you save yourself a ton of time. So you get a lot more efficiency by doing that. By looking at the pictures, if there is a virtual tour, that helps as well. Go through the virtual tour, look at the layout. Does it have a walkout basement? Does it have a separate entrance? where the layout looks like you'll be able to close it off, create a completely separate suite. Now, of course, you guys are already working with illegal suites. So for the most part, a lot of the groundwork's been laid out there for you, and it's bringing it up to code though. So in terms of layout for illegal suites, do you ever see an illegal suite where, let's say, the layout just looks like, you know what, this probably isn't worth pursuing? Or is it always just a no-brainer? If there's an illegal suite, um, we could probably make that work.
We've seen some questionable illegal suites. Like, someone
I
will
know.
like someone will stuff like a sink underneath the stairs in the basement and,
Hmm.
call it an illegal suite. Or it's just really funny what people claim are illegal suites. And there's some of those that were like, we can't work with this. It's not going to be realistic. There's been, I think we've kept for the most part the layout of them, but we've always torn out like the cabinets and everything down
Oh
there.
yeah, yeah,
So I think we just make sure that the layout kind of makes sense. If it's something that's really funky that we can't really work with, then we're probably not going to pursue it.
yeah.
But I think for the most part, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. So to elaborate on the layout really quick, the biggest determining factor in my mind is like, is it a separate entrance? Like you shouldn't
Hmm.
have to walk through the primary suite or the upstairs suite to get to the basement suite. And you'll never be
Yes.
able to legalize a suite that way. You'll have to do a lot of work again, maybe cutting in a side entrance. And so I guess to answer your question in short, that is one of the bigger ones. Like
Yeah.
we're pretty good in working with the layout in the basement as long as it's like, hey, there's a separate entrance to get there and you're not walking through another suite to get there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. That's like the first box that needs to be checked.
Yes. Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to even pursue it. No, I fully get that. Now, what are some common things that you find when taking over illegal suites where it's like, okay, we're gonna need to do this, and this to sort of legalize it?
You mean compared to adding one from scratch?
No, just in general, like in the shape that you're buying it in, what are like boxes that now need to be checked to take it from we bought an
Mm.
illegal suite to it's now legal and it's good to go? What are some common things that you guys find you have to do?
Yeah. So the biggest one right now, and kind of your most expensive too, are proper window size in the bedrooms
Hmm.
because they need
Getting
to be
those egress
proper
windows.
egress size. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so more often than not, especially on older houses, you're cutting into the foundation, replacing that window, redoing all the finishing around it, and that can get pretty pricey. And then I would say the next one after that would be the utility rooms. Now in Calgary, now we have our bylaw states that they need to be entirely drywalled and smoke
Yeah.
proof is what they call it. So
Yeah.
sealed completely. That can get pretty expensive depending on the layout of the utility room, like working around furnace, existing like HVAC systems and stuff. Like
Yeah.
that can be a pretty big undertaking. Those are the two biggest ones. And then obviously the other ones is adding in smoke detectors and CO2 alarms, which again, depending on your layout and how good your electrician is, because that we definitely that is one thing we any major electrical or plumbing work, we definitely contract that out. And
Yeah.
so we have a really good electrician who comes in and he's done a couple of them for us now. And where you have to be putting smoke detectors in certain places. So can they get those there easily without, opening up too many walls, snaking it through areas, right? And so like that
Yes.
that can be a little bit more expensive as well.
One advantage of adding one from, like legalizing one versus adding one from scratch is that you don't need to have a separate heat source. So we don't need to worry about adding a second furnace or adding any sort of baseboard heating. So that saves us, I think, a lot of money. And same with soundproofing. We don't have to worry about that.
Yes.
So those are some big steps that generally you'd have to check off when you're adding a suite.
I completely get that. Now, question for you guys: how did you guys stumble across this sort of dialed in buy box in terms of your criteria? Because it's not only bar method, it's not only you know secondary suites, but it's specifically finding illegal suites and legalizing them. Was this something that you stumbled across by accident, or how did that happen?
Yes, kind of. And I'll go back to that when we first started looking at the 6 month period and how we changed in like the 3 to 4 months before we bought the first one. We started running a lot of the numbers. We started contacting City of Calgary, talking with bylaw officers, everything. They have a lot online as well. There was a lot of resources online, but it was like slowly we realized that like if it was an illegal suite, it was a lot easier to do. It was a lot
Hmm.
easier to legalize, and that there was a little bit of a value add right there. And also like we had seen a couple of this box now that we had seen a couple early on and kind of like thought they were it, but didn't go with them. And then like after more research later on, kind of came to the conclusion that that's where it is. That's what we want to do.
And we realized that you don't really get the value of what it costs to add a suite from scratch back in your appraisals. Unfortunately, maybe it would go to that, but right now you don't really get what it's worth. So that was
Yes.
something else that really caused us to look at illegal suites versus just adding one from scratch.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So you alluded to, hiring out some trades and stuff. And early on when we got started, um, Alicia, I think you said Patrick was hands-on, you good at the marketing side. How do you guys split your roles in this partnership?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question because it's interesting because Alicia has contributed with the renovations is and what it ends up being like as well, and an Ellie a little bit though, and I now find myself contributing on like more of like the office work and property management side of it, right? But at first, yes, it was mostly I was doing most of the hands on work. I all the trips to Home Depot, Rona, Lowe's,
Yeah,
talking to contractors. I was acting as their general contractors, project manager is what I was doing, right? And then Alicia was handling more on the like tenant relations side, property management side, our bookkeeping and accounting stuff, right? Like just from my background, I have a lot of hands-on experience. She has a lot of like the office setting experience. And so it was a very clear cut like this. You kind of stick in your area, I'll stick in my area. If we need help in either way, then we're here to help each other. And that doesn't mean that
yeah,
we weren't talking to each other at all. Like we were very communicative throughout always have been throughout our entire process is like I all the time. Sometimes you just need to talk stuff out sometimes, right?
yeah.
Like I maybe know what the right decision is, but sometimes I need the opinion of somebody else. I need to talk with somebody else about it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. I fully get that. But it's nice knowing where that role separation comes in, and it's like that's what you focus on, that's what I focus on, so that you guys could sort of collectively add your strengths to make a more efficient team. Question for you is in terms of the initial finding properties, running the numbers, is that something you guys do like collectively together? Like, hey, this is sort of how we like spending some of our free time. Do one of you guys sort of take it and then sort of what's that initial the initial beginning of a pipeline of like bringing a property in and then screening it, and then I'm guessing you probably both go to the showing, but what does that look like from a property crossing your screen there?
Well, actually, surprisingly enough, we have not really. I have actually not seen. I think two of ours
Before we bought
before we bought them. So
What happens?
So yes, yeah, I work up north in northern Alberta, so like I work out of town a lot, and so it would be Alicia going to see them. And so I guess to start, I am normally looking at the properties and looking at the purchase price, the quick layout of it, because I like I had mentioned earlier, I'm not very good like visual. I can picture it all, and so
Yeah,
right away I'll say to Alicia, okay, I think this one. And then, she'll also do the same. And then sometimes we're always looking at the rental numbers as well, right? Okay,
yeah.
what do we think after we've renovated this? What can we get realistically for rent up and down? And does that make sense? Does that make sense and fit all of our financials and make this like, okay, this is a good one. This is a property that we think we'd like to add, right? And so that's kind of how our pipeline does work. And then more often than not, if it checks all those boxes, all prior to seeing it, Alicia will go look at it, or if I'm in town, I will come look as well. And it's pretty clear, when we're there, if this is the one, right?
Yeah, and typically we aim for about a minimum of $500 cash flow per month with our
Okay.
properties, which has really helped us right now as some of the rents have gone down. We're in a good
Yeah.
position still to be able to float those properties and not be breaking even or at a loss with them. So that's something that's served us really well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Cash flow is sort of it's your lifeline. It's that safety net to hedge you against any market changes, rents going down or costs of utilities going up or interest rates going up, any of those things, right? So yeah, it's
Right.
nice to have a buffer, and suite properties typically provide that higher cash flow. Now, question for you is, like, I have a good idea on how you guys get that initial process going, but when after you view a property, you like the numbers seem to make sense. You're obviously using numbers based off of experience when it comes to typical renovations that need to take place. For people out there who are looking to sort of get into something similar, wherever they are, whatever city they're in, they do the homework like you did up front on what needs to take place, but they very uncertain on what those rehab costs are going to come out to. That's the toughest number to nail down, I find. Do you have any advice for them? How did you guys gain confidence in that, and what does that look like today when you're running your numbers?
Add 20% right off right as soon as you're done your rental cost numbers. We definitely learned that the hard way on almost all of them, really. But like by about the third one, I was adding 20% every time, and that was kind of put me closer to what it was accurate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think that would definitely be number one advice.
I think
Yeah.
I think you have to expect the unexpected. Like even our last one that we did in 2024, I think it was last May, we had to replace all of the windows, which cost, I don't know, $16,000 or something like that. We were not accounting for that at all. We didn't get an inspection, which we don't anymore usually. Because we kind of know what we're looking for, but the windows wasn't something that we paid attention to really. So
Yeah.
that was kind of a shocking cost. So just being prepared for things that when you open up a wall, there might be something that you didn't anticipate. We've also experienced that. Just kind of going in it with that mindset and having some extra money prepared for the renovation, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah, some contingencies. And along the way, though, it does get a little bit easier because you're like, okay, we've done this enough times. We know what that cost is. And then,
Mm-hmm.
your numbers get a little bit more accurate, but you'll always have the unexpected that pops up. I always recommend to people is, get a quotes from a couple of different contractors, ideally
Mm-hmm.
referrals. And, that can give you an idea because typically those quotes will vary drastically, even for the same
Yes.
work, even if it's itemized, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's kind of one of those where you'll never have true confidence until you've done it enough times when you first get started, right? And you just have to account for the unexpected or being off on your numbers slightly. Now, question for you, when you guys are doing these renovations, typically at least, are you updating the upstairs as well, like the property types or the properties you find in at whatever age they at? Do you find that you're doing an update to the upstairs kitchen and bathroom as well as legalizing the basement suite, or is it just typically put a tenant upstairs and then just legalize the downstairs?
For the most part, we have renovated the upstairs as well. Not extensively, but we'll update the cabinets or the countertop or change the flooring, something like that. Aside from one of our properties, that was a 2004, I believe it is. So it's nice still. It's not totally updated, but it's a really nice unit still. So we didn't do much to that. But we have a very strict tenant profile that we try to attract. So we want to make sure that our units really reflect that tenant profile that we want to have living in there. So that's
Yeah.
a big thing for us, just making sure that it's something that someone's going to be proud to call home. Um, but yeah, I'd say for the most part, we do renovate the upstairs too.
Yeah, so to add to that, I think it's very dependent on, what it is you're buying and what is the state of it, right? So like there has been some where we've just painted the upstairs cabinets because like they were in really I ripped off countertop and they were, cabinets were in really good shape. I just redid the countertop, painted the cabinets, right? Like there
Yeah.
wasn't that it wasn't crazy or extensive or anything. And I think though that's one of the benefits of when you're in there doing the work yourself and you've had the hands-on experience, right? Because
Yeah.
a contractor and multiple contractors might come in there and say, yeah, okay, this is what it is to rip it all out of there. It might not be, and especially in a market right now where trades are hard to come by, it might not be
Yeah.
worth their time to come in and repaint cabinets and,
Yeah.
just redo a countertop. Like they might be looking to redo an entire kitchen, right? Redo all the
Yeah.
flooring and everything. So I think it's very dependent on the property, and having
Oh yeah.
that hands-on experience helps big time when you're in there boots on the ground and able to see it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's keeping in mind that, look, this isn't a flip property, right? So you don't want to
Yes.
over renovate either.
Yep.
So it's knowing
Mhm.
that fine line of like what's good enough to be
Yep.
rented out, and not like what's your ideal kitchen look like, or the ideal state of the property need to be in, because you just don't typically get that money back. Now, question for you guys: you guys are self-managing all your properties, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What's sort of the most challenging thing you've come across so far with regards to self-managing suited properties?
Surprisingly, we haven't had any really tenant conflicts between the upstairs and the downstairs. Not to say we won't ever. Like, that's something that probably, there's no soundproofing in a lot of the units.
Yeah,
Something that definitely could happen. But for the most part, we haven't had any kind of altercations between the upstairs and downstairs. But I think the last year has been a lot of people breaking their leases. So just navigating that in this market has been a big challenge, and just working with them to do unanticipated showings and those sorts of things has been a big thing.
Yeah, so to add to that, knowing the landlord tenant laws in and out in your province, right? Like
yeah,
we try to be very um honest people, and we're not here to, screw anybody out of money. And that,
yeah,
like, that's just how we like to run our business. And so, like, we've taken pride in really learning that and going off of that and adhering to that.
yeah.
That has at times been a big undertaking to make sure, hey, we are legally doing the right thing here. This is how it's supposed to go. I think another important thing to add when you are self-managing is, and especially once you get up into a couple more units, is you start to realize that, and this is very important to know, like, real estate isn't hands off. Like,
Oh yeah.
when you're self-managing, um, stuff comes up all the time at the most unexpected times, right? And so it's like it ends up being a lot of hands-on. Maybe not, we do long-term rental, we don't do any short-term. So maybe it's not as hands-on as managing a short-term rental, but even the long-term can be fairly hands-on.
Wait, Patrick, are you saying real estate's not passive?
That's it. That's exactly what I'm saying, Al.
No, I fully agree with that. Um, Alicia, there was one thing you mentioned. There was like, having some of the turnover. That was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask. Was, the cash flow tends to be a lot higher on the suited property side. What do you find that turnover to look like?
I'm just trying to think if there's any kind of trends in them, because we have some people who have been in our basement for 3 years, some who've been there for 2 years. The upstairs sometimes turns over faster. So I don't know if there's really any
No.
commonalities between the upstairs staying longer, basement, or anything like that.
Yeah,
And in terms of how long people stay, again, it kind of ranges. Like, we have some really, really good tenants that we want to stay for, years and years if they can, that are really happy in the places. But what I've mentioned tends to be someone who moved in less than a year ago that breaks their lease. So we have
yeah.
some that have been in there for years, but then some that don't stay even a year. And there's nothing really I can pinpoint in terms of what's going to predict that.
Hmm.
No, the only thing that I can think right now is, like, we've had 3 different tenants break their lease down the last year.
Yeah.
And, what being in Alberta, we have, as you know, being up in Edmonton, like, we have had a lot of people move to Alberta in the last couple of years.
Oh
And
yeah.
so now we're starting to wonder, is it people who, wanna move back? Are they not wanting to be here anymore? Has it changed too much for them, or are they not liking it? We're wondering if that is maybe a contributing factor to it, but
Because I think the majority of the ones who have broken their lease are ones that moved here from BC or Ontario or wherever else.
No, I get that. Now, you said that, there's nothing that you pinpoint in particular towards like those who stay longer versus those who leave sooner. But when it comes to tenant screening, we know that's like one of those things that you kind of have to take seriously, or else like the management side tends to be a lot harder than it needs to be. When it comes to that, what have you found are some things that you guys have put in place to ensure that you minimize the chance of putting in problematic tenants that could scare away good tenants that you have already living there?
Yeah, so even though I said that some tenants have broke their lease in the last year, overall we've had really fantastic tenants and we haven't had any problematic ones. So I want to state that first, that I think our process is really, really strong and something that I'm
Yeah,
confident in. Um we So in order, basically what we do is we get someone to reach out to us if they're interested. They answer a couple questions. When are you looking to move? Why are you looking to move? Do you have any pets? Because we allow pets in our units.
Yeah.
those sorts of things. So that's kind of our screening. And then if they look good, we check out their social media accounts too. Then we'll book
Uh-huh.
a showing. We'll do a little, not an open house, but we'll choose like an hour window and we allocate certain time slots to them. We'll kind of gauge what kind of people they seem like, whether they seem genuine. We're pretty good at, I think everybody's pretty good at reading other people for the most part. Um, and then they'll fill out an application if they're interested and move forward with it. So I think there's a couple of different steps that we always follow, and we, funny enough, tend to attract the same like I don't know what you want to say
Profile.
it, profile of
Yeah.
The same
people.
profile. Yeah.
Yeah, always.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to elaborate on our very first step because I think honestly I think it's one of the most important ones that kind of stands out to me. It's your very first interaction with somebody, and that it right now is
Yeah.
obviously over normally Rentfaster, Messenger, or whatever. Like Alicia mentioned,
Yes.
in our ads, we always put 3 questions at the very end. It's nothing crazy. We're not asking for any personal information. It's normally how many people, what date are you looking to move in? Do you have any pets? And we put those at the very end of
Hmm.
the ad. And the number of people and say, please answer these questions if you're interested. And the number of people who will actually not answer those questions right away
Is
off the
this
bat.
available?
Exactly. And so right away, like that first interaction right there is so important. Like that tells you so much, right? And people don't really
Yeah.
realize that, but it's like that right there piques our interest. And I think that is the biggest
Hmm.
pivoting point when if when we're deciding whether or not to move forward with somebody.
Yeah. No, 100%. I fully get that. Um, Another thing, that Alicia mentioned was social media. Like, it's
Mhm.
Yeah.
that's a good one to look at as well. Like, if they pass that, if you just look at their profile and you could kind of somewhat gauge, like, should
Yes.
we even book a showing with these people? No, I love that. That's great advice. Now, we've spoken about, the tenant screening process that you guys have. How does it look like when it's coming time to renew, renewing those leases? Do you guys sort of proactively increase the rent every year or handle it case by case to see if you feel like it's under rented, or maybe these tenants are good? Let's not give them as much of a rent bump because we want to keep them going. What does that process look like for you guys?
We have a fairly detailed process on it. We first start with 3 months remaining in the lease. We will reach out to them.
Mm,
If it is somebody we want back, then we'll reach out to them and just gauge their interest and just put that idea in their mind to get them to start thinking about it. We don't ask for an answer right then and there, but we say, hey, it's about 3 months. Take the next month, think about it, do your research. Maybe they want to, explore other options and get back to us at maybe the 2 month period. That way the 2 month period we find gives us a lot of time to react,
yeah,
post it if we need to, go in there, do an inspection, maybe note what needs to be fixed or cleaned properly. And it just allows us to market it better, allows us better success, right? So that 3 months we find is the best. When it comes to how are we deciding if there's increases or what, it's a lot to do with what's going on in the market right now, right? And so and like it's mostly the market, but it also is who is in that unit. Like Alicia mentioned, like we have one in one of our basements that's been there for 3 years. Like since we've owned the place, she's been there and she's one of our best tenants. And we've barely raised the rent on her at all because like it is worth it to have somebody you can trust and rely on in there, right? It's not
yeah,
worth the extra, maybe $50 or $100 a month, extra to have to turn that over and take a chance on somebody else. It is peace of mind to have that person in there. So the factors influencing us when we come to that decision is the market for one, but also just how are we feeling about that tenant in there.
And also our costs do factor in as well, like,
of
property
course.
taxes, all those sorts of things. Like, we're not raising the rent to those levels by no means because the rent would be very high. But,
Yeah.
we definitely pay attention to that as well. And we try and do little increases for tenants too, so that they're not paying the same amount for years and years, and then suddenly one year we have to raise it like $300, $400.
Yeah,
So that's something that we keep in mind too, is just incremental raises that, are comfortable for them, help us cover our costs as well. This year is a little bit different. Like I mentioned, the market has slowed down a lot. I think it's still good in Edmonton, but in Calgary, it's quite a bit different this year. So we've had
yeah,
to really adapt to that for the first time. And keep everyone's rent the same, which is fine. We want to maintain the tenants that we have in there, and it is what it is. Like they're great, so we want to keep them, and they're happy, we're happy. So yeah.
Yeah, that's it's sort of navigating that sweet spot. Like if they're good
Mhm.
tenants, it's like, yes, do we need to maximize the rents and then risk having a little bit of vacancy while we have the turnover anyway? Then if you work out the numbers, does it make sense at the end of the day? At least here in Alberta, we want to keep tenants for as long as we can because we don't have the cap,
Mhm.
right? So it's just like you say, it's those incremental increases so that, when you have to sort of increase somewhat close to where market rents are at, it's not a big shock for the tenants and then they
Yeah.
just, move out. So yeah, it's a smart strategy. Now, question for you guys, managing your properties in between. We've spoken about getting tenants, spoken about like renewing the lease. In between, how often do you have property inspections to ensure that the property is going well? Changing furnace filters, all that stuff. Are the tenants doing it themselves? Are you guys checking in to make sure things are being maintained? What does that look like for you guys? I know everyone's a little different there.
Yeah, so it's interesting because this goes back to like the hands-on and how hands-on it actually is, right? Um, when so in terms of inspections, we're not, unless there's some particular reason we think we need to go in there and do an inspection, we are not doing like, 3 months, 6 months or whatever. Generally, the only time we will do an inspection is at the 1 year if they want to renew their lease. We want to get
Hmm.
in there, okay, have a quick look, make sure everything's good before we sign you guys for another year. Maybe address anything, like you said, changing furnace filters, right? Try to get that done then, right? But what we also find is some of our properties are older, like some of them built in the 60s and 70s, right? And there is small issues here and there. And again, going back to like this is very hands-on. More than likely, because I'm acting as basically our maintenance person. More than likely, I'm going into a property once or twice a year to fix something or have a look at something. This is acting up here, whatever, right? And so that makes great opportunities to be doing an inspection when you're not actually there to do an inspection. So that gives great peace of mind, and that is maybe one of the reasons why we're not, okay, it's been 3 months, we want to come do an inspection, or 6 months, we're going to come do one, right? Is like we're being efficient in like I'm doing inspections while I'm there for other reasons.
Exactly. Exactly. And then they also feel like you taking care of the property as well. So it's from that
Yes.
perspective, like, hey, is there anything else that maybe needs fixing around here? You could have a look and look to see that they taking care of the property, show them that you taking care of the property. You're actually a landlord who cares and wants to ensure that they have a
Mhm.
good living environment. So they then take care of things and pay their rent on time. And yeah, no, fantastic, guys. I'm coming up to one of my favorite segments of the show called Time Capsule. So let's imagine you both stumbled across a time machine that allows you to go back and forth in time. You can't change anything, unfortunately. So you can't say, hey, young Patrick, go meet Alicia a little sooner, kind of thing, none of those things. But you can give or receive advice from your younger or older self. So let's first go back to, when each of you guys were 18 years old. With the knowledge and experience you have now, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Um,
Take your time.
yeah. Don't worry. You're gonna meet her and you guys are gonna do great things together.
Mhm.
I love it. I love it.
I think it would be for me, don't hold on to your money so tight, put it to work
Mm.
instead.
Ooh, yeah, I think that's a big false belief, that a lot of people struggle with, especially if you're not coming from a ultra wealthy family where they savvy about investing and making your money work for you. If you come from a middle class or maybe a little bit of a poorer family, it's all about saving. It's just saving and holding on to it. Um, and it's less spoken about how to actually get your money to work for you. So it's great advice. It's great advice. Now, guys, if we were to flip it over and look ahead to your 80th birthday, what advice do you imagine that your 80th self would give you at your present age?
I love
This can
these
be anything, by the
questions.
way. It can be
Yeah.
anything. Investing, familial, personal, whatever.
I think it's one that we say to each other a lot, which is, in the moment, this seemed like the biggest stress in the world, but looking back, it
Hmm.
was the smallest obstacle that we had to overcome, and everything in
Yeah,
your life is gonna look that way when you look back on it.
Yep. I
yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny how we'll always blow something into something that's actually bigger than what it is, and you look back shortly afterwards, and it's it's so irrelevant. But in the time, we stress ourselves out, we cause ourselves so much anxiety, making a bigger problem of it than it really is. So it's constantly something when something like that happens that I catch myself and try and remind myself, like, hey, is this really going to be an issue? Just calm down. It's not the end of the
Yeah.
world kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that constant reminder is a good thing. I love that. I love that. Okay, guys, let's go to our rapid fire round of questions. So just answer the first thing that comes to mind, and you know, let's have fun with it. So,
Okay.
what's something in real estate that's way harder than people think?
Managing the properties.
Managing the properties.
Um, budgeting.
Oh, yeah, both of them. Yeah, I love that. Okay. What's the most memorable piece of advice you've ever received about business or investing?
Don't be afraid to lose money.
Luck is what happens when opportunity meets hard work.
Okay, you love it, guys. Okay, let's keep it going. If you could instantly master one skill outside of real estate, what would it be?
I would love to be a pilot.
A pilot.
Yeah.
Nice. Would you just fly fly both yourself and Alisha around
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Either that or a
like a
fighter
private
jet. Those
pilot?
seem,
Ooh,
either a
yeah.
private plane or a fighter jet. Like it just seems like a really, really, it's all, I think I have dreams a lot about flying.
So you're just gonna build like your own, your own little place with a little landing strip there. Take it out. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
love
That
it.
would be the dream. Yeah.
Um, I think for me, it would be something coding or AI related.
I didn't expect that. Both answers, honestly, would not have expected that. But yes, I can get the coding and AI, but as well, yeah. I was gonna go into coding when I finished high school, and my dad was like, "No, do accounting, do finance. Like, if you understand business, you could do anything. You could be in any business, but you understand the fundamentals." And I really enjoyed coding in high school. I did a little bit of that, so yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. All right, guys, what's a business decision that has completely changed how you invest?
Yeah. I think taking the leap and betting on ourselves, definitely in the very beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll have to piggyback off that one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a strong one. It's a definitely a strong one because you kind of need to. When you're first getting started, oftentimes you don't have that initial validation. You might not have people in your corner that's like, yeah, you can do it. People may be
Exactly.
hesitant, and they may just be doing that, just out of love to protect you. But you kind of need to bet on yourself and have that confidence to say that I might not know everything that I'm doing. I'm going to take this leap of faith. At the very least, I know that I'll have the work ethic to see it through, and I'll be resourceful enough to make whatever challenges happen, um, ones that I can overcome.
Completely agree with that. And we've applied that now in multiple areas of our life. Like just having that validation behind us now at this point, it's like we are
Yeah.
capable of taking on any challenge now.
Power couple, guys. I have been loving it. Honestly, this has been an amazing episode. Patrick, Alicia, I can't thank you guys enough for coming on. Where can our listeners connect with you and just learn more about what you're working on so they can follow along your journey?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. We had a really good time.
Thank you, Al.
I think Instagram is the best place to find us.
Yeah,
Our account is called Heels and Hammer _, where we used to
I
be pretty
love that.
active on there. We're hopefully gonna be a little bit more active on there again. But yeah, Instagram for sure.
Heels and hammer. Now, tell me, is that because you're doing some renovations in the heels, or are the heels like you're part of it and Patrick's the hammer?
I like that idea there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely because of the one half of it is the construction, which is what I bring, and she brings the
Yeah.
office side of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To our listeners out there, if you're looking for more valuable insights, be sure to subscribe. Share this with someone who can benefit, and as always, keep investing smartly. Thank you for tuning in to the Wealth Through Real Estate Show. If you're interested in learning how to effectively use and scale the BRRRR strategy, then you absolutely need to check out my episode with Crystal Crom. This is your host, Ray Noble, signing off.